Okay. I'm sure you can confirm that.
There's somewhere I need to confirm the recording or something. I don't see it.
I think it's yeah, it's recording on. It's
Okay.
just shown on my end. I will check if the
Okay.
if the YouTube stream is. YouTube, if it's working, and if so, we can start soon.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
If the YouTube stream is, yeah, looks good. Okay. Then I suggest we start. The floor is yours, Dale. Thank you very much for joining us today, and yeah, let's get started.
Okay, thank you very much for offering me the opportunity to talk about the energy situation in China. So let's start with some basics. It's like modern energy is the lifeblood of industrialization. And here I show a graph. Basically, the x-axis is the per capita GDP, and the y-axis is the energy usage. As we can see, that there's no such thing as a no energy rich country. Basically, for the last 300 years, human beings have achieved enormous improvement in welfare thanks to industrialization, and modern energy is the lifeblood of industrialization. Sometimes I think people in the Western world who didn't live through that transformation took it for granted. But at least for Chinese, at least my generation of Chinese, we live through that transformation, and we don't take it for granted. Then here I show the increase of energy use in China in the last 50 years. So here you can see basically from 1970s to today, it's like in 55 years, there's a 12-fold increase in per capita energy use. And that's the physical material basis for China's economic miracle in the last few decades. And here, let me just give you some background, like how life was like in China 50 years ago, roughly the time I was born. So, for example, at the time, food was strictly rationed in China. So daily supply of calories per capita was only slightly above 800 kilocalories, which is basically considered serious food insecurity in today. So at the time, monthly ration for urban residents was like for grains, basically the back part for calorie supply is 10 to 20 kilograms, depending on age, sex, and occupation. Cooking oil, half a kilogram. Meat, between half to 1 kilogram. Eggs, between half to 1 kilogram. Sugar, a quarter of a kilogram. So that's a monthly ration in the early 70s. And fortunately, when I was growing up, there's a huge growth in food production thanks to Green Revolution. So essentially, China get rid of the food rationing in 1992. And then also energy scarcity and poverty was very common. So I was born in Chengdu, actually. It's a capital city of Sichuan province, a pretty large city. But when I was growing up, there was no winter heating, while the average winter temperature was around 5 degrees in winter. So basically, you just have to wear your outdoor coats all the time indoors. We had electricity, but there was frequent blackout. It's about once per week. And each family was required to use less than 37 kilowatt per month. And we could cook with natural gas, but gas out was quite often too. So every family had coal stoves as backup as well. Tap water was available, but during the first 10 years of life, it's about 30 families shared 3 taps outdoors. So when I was around 10, my family moved into better apartments. Basically, we had indoor plumbing, meaning sharing a kitchen and a bathroom with another family. And for smaller cities and rural areas, the progress came even later. So for example, my grandmother, who lived in a second-tier city in Sichuan, she cooked with firewood until mid-1980s. And for my field research, in the last 20 years, for example, in 2009, I visited a Miao minority village. It's one of the poorest areas in China. So the village only get electricity in mid-1990s. They got tap water in 2004. And at the time of my visit, the taps were still outside, just like in my childhood, because they still didn't have indoor plumbing. They have tap water outdoors, so they can get fresh, clean water. So that's energy realism. Basically, most of my generation of Chinese we have, because it's really based on hard reality. For example, about when Greta Thunberg popped up in 2018, I remember I have a conversation with one of my friends that's also a professional collaborator who's a researcher on China's industrial policies. So he lost his father in a coal mine accident when he was still a teenager. So in terms of bad side effect of fossil fuels, nobody get worse than him. But still, when we talk about Greta Thunberg or Just Stop Oil, Next Generation, all these radical climate activists from the West, he made the comments, what are the alternatives to fossil fuels? Do they have an answer? Have you ever think about it seriously besides their lofty but stupid slogans? Basically says they are just spoiled Western youngsters who take the benefit of industrialization for granted. They have never experienced energy poverty and never cared to learn. They are essentially anti-industrialization activists. So the central question actually for me is how to ensure food security and energy security with the changing climate. That's the central question for me. That's why I choose to work on climate, because I lived through the transformation from largely agricultural society to an industrial society. And I know how energy security and food security, how important they are, and we need to ensure it. So for China, actually, I would say China for the last 20 years has always have this all the above approach to energy. That's why recently when I discussed the policy change with some of my collaborators in Beijing from the US, we're all joking. Is Trump learning from China with his all the above approach to energy? Because that's essentially what China has been doing for last 20 years. It's like when you look at what China is doing, China is still building more coal plants than the rest of the world combined. China is building more wind and solar than the rest of the world combined. China is also building more nuclear than the rest of the world combined. It is simply energy hungry and want to just to do everything to ensure its energy security. And one other very crucial guiding principle of China's energy transition is what we call 先立后破, meaning we will not destroy our existing energy system without building something better first. I think that's one of the problems with Germany's energy vendor. Sorry for my blank comment, but I feel like some of the German energy vendor is like they are destroying the existing energy system without building something better first. So here, let's first look at some of different sectors. So indeed, for the last 20 years, there's exponential growth of both solar and wind in China. That's basically what's the German media or the German like to tell you, which is true. So here is the growth of the solar industry in China, which is very impressive. China essentially built about half of global solar. And wind is similar case. It's like about half of the installed wind capacity is in China, and slightly less than half, about 40%. So China's policy on wind and solar has been evolving for the last 20 years. So China more or less copied Germany's EEG policy to subsidize wind and solar development. So I was a supporter for wind and solar, but always conditionally. So actually in 2013, I personally helped to arrange some meeting between Hess Joseph Phil. Some of you may know, basically one of the Green politicians who was the architect of the German EEG policy. I helped to arrange his meeting with some of the top Chinese government energy experts within the Chinese climate delegation. So at the time, I supported EEG, but I always think it's an industrial policy to help to scale up potentially beneficial technologies. But industrial policy should always have a sunset time to prevent it from becoming a permanent subsidy to inferior technologies. And so when you look at the massive growth of wind and solar in China, you have to say, yes, that policy is successful, but also it's like it should have to come to its sunset time. And fortunately, China is doing that. China is reducing its subsidies. So starting from June 1st this year, no more feed-in tariff. For newly installed wind and solar, the price forming will be decided by market auctions. And this policy is rather new, just for a few months, but we already see the effect of, even though the long-term effect, we still have to wait and see, but we can already see the massive drop in new solar and installment. It's like between May and June this year, there's essentially more than about 85% drop in for newly installed solar and wind. So fortunately or unfortunately, this is like it's confirmed one of the honest, also famous comment by a capitalist, Warren Buffett. So he basically said there's no reason to build wind except to basically without government tax credit, there's no reason to build wind. Seems that might be the case for China as well. But the obvious question is how long will Germany continue its EEG policy? In my humble opinion, I think it has long past expiration date. So despite the massive growth of wind and solar, fossil fuels still dominates. So as you can see here, when in terms of primary energy, so coal is still more than 52%, oil about 18%, and natural gas about 9%. So all end up to about 80%. So fossil fuel still dominates. And even though the percentage share of coal continue to drop, but the absolute share of coal continue to grow. So as you can see here, right now, China consumes more than 50% of global coal. So when you look at this so-called green tech, the solar, wind, and batteries, China dominates all their supply chain. So here I show the numbers. So for example, for solar, if you look at the overall supply chain, China dominates about more than 80% of the solar supply chain. And for wind supply chain, similar, but slightly less. So it's only 60 to 70% of the overall supply chain. And for batteries, it's also the case. So China dominates 75 to 80% of the battery supply chain. Why? Because besides basically successful industrial policies as well as innovation, the most important part, in my opinion, is cheap energy. Because when you look at the supply chain of solar, wind, and batteries, they are all energy-intensive manufacturers. And so because coal provides cheap energy, that's really the backbone for all these energy-intensive manufacturers. So the average consumer electricity price in China is rather low. It's only 8 cents per kilowatt hour. And normally the energy-intensive industries have their own on-site coal units to further bring down the cost. This is what we call self-generation in Chinese. So the cost for coal self-generation is around 5 cents per kilowatt hour nationwide. And for example, I give you the examples of TCL, one of the global leader in polysilicon production. They have 4 coal units on its production site in Xinjiang. So each one has 660 megawatts. And also there's a huge coal mine just miles away, and a dedicated train line shipping coal from pithead to the site. So that's how they streamline the production and to bring down the cost. So that's how solar panels are made, basically with cheap coal from China. So right now, I haven't looked up the numbers today. So Germany imports about 87% of its solar panels from China. So for not so sunny Germany, I would say, continue to build more solar panels, essentially just outsourcing your cold burning to China. Thanks for creating jobs in China, but in terms of environmental benefit, I would say it is really questionable. And so given this current energy situation in China, so we also continue to have an energy debate. So for the last 20 years, China started to have a big and growing climate lobby, and together with the solar, wind, and battery industry interest, they all say solar, wind, and battery is the future. And fortunately, there are also enough energy realists point out when you really look at the supply chain, solar, wind, and battery, they are just fossil fuel accessories made with fossil fuels. They are not really true alternatives that can function without fossil fuels. And also with the growing penetration of wind and solar, China start to have similar problems, just as we are experiencing in Germany, like Dunkelflute, it's everywhere. It's like when you need the electricity most, but the wind and solar may not come. It's just the reality. So there's continued debate what the future would be. So for example, here I showed you there's 2 high-level articles published on Nature. So one of the article basically acknowledge that solar and wind really cannot deliver, and what should we do? And this particular article argues that CCS, carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration is the key. And then there's another article basically examines the critical mineral constraints for the energy transition. So that article is very interesting because actually when you go back to say, look at say some of the critical minerals, actually for some of the critical minerals like lithium and graphite, it's like China really dominate in terms of China has 70% to 90% global share, but that article, when it's basically examines, for example, China's promise for Paris Agreement, but they say even with China's dominance in all these critical minerals, that's not enough to deliver. So this comes to our favorite topic. What's the solution? So in my humble opinion, it's like nuclear is basically is one of the very crucial things we really absolutely need for our energy security, especially. But very interestingly is that nuclear is not in China's climate discussion at all. The reason is that during 2009 Copenhagen Climate Conference, the Chinese delegation did bring the nuclear industry along, and they were rather shocked to find out that how much the international environment and climate lobby hates the nuclear industry, so they never did again. It's just nuclear quietly just dropped out of the thing. But fortunately, China does continue to build nuclear quietly. So, for example, nuclear is included in China's green finance taxonomy. So that means nuclear enjoys the same no interest rate and other preferential treatment similar as wind and solar. And also, fortunately, there's no anti-nuclear activism among Chinese environmental NGOs. I did my small part to prevent that from happening. As somebody who used to work with lots of international NGOs, I personally turned down offers from big international NGOs to do anti-nuclear lobby in China, but also I have talked and engaged debating with many other Chinese environmental activists, basically try to prevent them from engaging anti-nuclear lobby. But so that's a good thing. Fortunately, we don't have anti-nuclear activism among environmental NGOs, but unfortunately, there are some anti-nuclear voices within some government think tanks. And some of them, because of their background in high positions, they were enough to sow doubts to the point so far they have successfully prevented inland nuclear reactors to be built up. So right now the situation is that China is building 28 nuclear reactor now, and for the last 4 years, every year, 10 new nuclear reactors are being approved. And so before Fukushima, there were 3 inland sites were under construction. Actually, some of them were quite advanced, so were quite far along in their construction. But unfortunately, because of Fukushima and all this nuclear scare, they have been suspended and until now. So in basically starting this year, I have been writing articles, talking to my collaborators in China. We are trying to restart the debate about basically we have recently published articles to say we need to restart the discussion about the inland nuclear, and we need to build them for the long-term energy security, and there's no way around it. So that work is ongoing, and actually I'm really looking forward to hopefully to working some of you together to basically to help to push the nuclear discussion globally, both in China, in Germany, and elsewhere. And so here is a graph of the China's nuclear growth for the last 20 years. So as you can see, it's like compared to, say, the growth of wind and solar, even coal. The nuclear China is continue to build it, but actually there still are lots of potential, but it has been stunted. And so that's my presentation, and you can follow me on these different platforms. If you want to further exchange, you can write to me. And sorry, I really rushed through my presentation, but so we can move into question and answers.
Thank you very much, Dave, for your presentation. You being fast with the presentation allows us a lot of time for questions and answers. So yeah, thank you already for this. While we are still while everyone is here, I will quickly announce the next presentation already. I think all listeners are from Nuklearia, so I don't have to make any Nuklearia announcement. But on 29th of September, there is going to be the next Nuklearia presentation from Ulrich Gräber about how to construct a nuclear power plant, and he was and he has been working a lot on nuclear power plants through his decades as a nuclear engineer and as a nuclear manager. So yeah, make sure to check this out. You can find the detailed announcement on our social media channels. Okay, but yeah, now let's start with questions. Everyone in the audience, feel free to write your questions into the chat or also raise your hands, so we can get a lively discussion. I will maybe start the discussion with a few questions of my own based on your presentation. So first, thanks for preventing anti-nuclear, doing your part in preventing anti-nuclear activism in China and trying to convince the government to embrace nuclear even more. My question, looking from the outside at Chinese nuclear, is you have now for since 2022 every year like those 10. I think 2024 it was 11 because there was some extra special high temperature reactor project approvals by the state council. So why exactly 10? I mean, who makes this decision? And are there any plans to maybe raise this approval number per year in the future? And yeah.
That's a good question, but my honest answer is I don't know. So I really don't know who makes these decisions, and I have asked some people working in the nuclear industries, and it's like, why can't they scale up? And they say, so there's different. Basically, there's no definitive answer, but there's basically some different people have offered some different explanations. For example, they say they are running out of, so right now all the nuclear reactors are built on the coastal side. They say they are kind of running out of coastal sites. And so that's basically, that's what makes me feel like it's more urgent. We need to open the discussion that about we need to basically start to build nuclear inlands. And another one is interesting is like somebody say, oh, because actually China has built all kinds of different nuclear reactors. Essentially, they have all the different types of third generation nuclear reactors. They say there's still internal debate, which one is the best design, which one should be rolled out in a more massive scale. They are still in ongoing internal debate. And another explanation I heard is that they say, yes, there's also some bottleneck for certain engineer parts. So that's, but I hope to visit some of these people I haven't met in person yet in my next China trip to have more in-depth discussion with them.
Yeah, that would be amazing, because it looks like there is a plan behind it, because there is this, this continuity in their approval numbers, and I would really like to understand what the rationale of the central government is behind this, because let's say my personal working theory on this has been China has been so great at scaling up everything that they want to scale up, and so I find it very hard to believe that there is some, like, let's say, industry limit that persists for more than a few years. So yeah, I think the most plausible, looking from the outside, is that there is some policy, some policy limit on the number of constructions. So now I will go on to the questions in the chat. Jan Rehbergen asks, what kinds of new builds are taking place? Is it mostly homegrown reactors or a little bit of everything?
You mean what kind of?
What types of new reactors are being built? Is it mostly
Yes.
homegrown designs, domestic designs from China, or is it still international licensed designs?
It's a little bit of everything, and also especially since it's like they are running out of sites to build the reactors. So essentially, it's just like where they already have 2 or 4 reactors, now they're scaling up to 8 or even 10 reactors on the same site. So they normally just build the same reactors on the same site. That answers the question.
Yeah, I think so. If not, Jan Rehbergen, feel free to unmute or continue to type in the chat. I will also ask more questions of his. For example, what role does advanced nuclear have in the Chinese nuclear energy policy, like thorium reactors, thorium molten salt reactors, high temperature gas reactors, and others?
Yes, so I think for the thorium reactors, they are building the world's first commercial scale thorium reactors, and that's under construction, but that's the current status. And so I don't know, because this is the first one still under construction, so we probably have to wait and see how they proceed from there.
Understood. And he also asks if you could explain a bit more what the concerns about inland plants are, inland nuclear power plants.
Well, the concern is just like because of Fukushima, there was just a big scare, and then they say, oh, China is just such a highly populated country. If there's really a nuclear accident like Fukushima, it's just a huge problem inland. It's safer just to build it on the sea. So that's the rationale. So that's why after Fukushima, they suspended the 3 inland build site, and now they only build.
Funny thing is that Fukushima was destroyed by the sea, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah, it's very interesting. But the argument is that just basically, if you have an accident like that, it would pollute lots of water. If it's at the sea, you can just release the water. But if it's like if it's inland, then it's a huge problem for the whole river system.
Okay. Thank you, Dale. So, but that would be an ideal case then for the more advanced nuclear reactors, because they don't have this cooling water problem and they don't operate at high pressures.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, well, let's hope that that they will see the light.
Yes.
One remark about this, Jan, the molten salt thorium test reactor is already an inland reactor. I think they even built this reactor in the very desert, so maybe they are more open to build this kind of reactor.
Yes.
Yeah, that's exciting news, exciting developments. I hope they will press on and make it a big success.
Yes.
And Jan also asked, could you tell us a little more about your current and upcoming work regarding nuclear power?
Oh, well, I think it's like I'm getting more offensive, because I would say for a very long time, it's like I'm just on the defensive side. I just want China to have the option open, have all the so-called technology openness, to have all the options open, and I think that's fortunately has been achieved. It's like, but I feel right now I want to be more offensive. Basically, I say all the above approach is not enough. Like, actually, we really need to say what's the best approach, especially when you look at the serious problems as well as the waste brought by wind and solar. I'm trying to start the discussion that we really need to look at life cycle analysis of the different energy sources and have more rational discussion, because in China, just as in Germany, there's huge wind and solar lobby. And to the point, it's like, I think they really scale the discussion. It's like, I think that's one reason, because if you think why China hasn't scaled up nuclear, because despite it's good China include nuclear in the taxonomy for green finance, but it's like China really hasn't put that much support for nuclear as it has put into wind and solar.
Mm-hmm. So Dale, if I can ask a follow-up question, the NGOs that tried to recruit you as an anti-nuclear campaigner, were those Western NGOs?
Yes, Western NGOs. Yes.
I mean, clubs like Greenpeace and
Greenpeace,
like that?
like Friends of the Earth, Greenpeace.
Okay.
The big.
The usual suspects.
Yes, the usual suspects.
All right, gotcha.
Yes.
One interesting thing about the lobbying efforts, and perhaps even a concern of me, is the nuclear industry in China is, I understand it, is almost entirely a state monopoly, right? These are state companies.
Well, it's just unlike Germany. It's like the nuclear started as basically as the civilian use, but for Chinese nuclear industry, it's started with its military programs with the nuclear bombs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So I will in a minute, Caspar, one more follow-up about this, because my concern is, if you have let's say a state industry, if it of course cannot maneuver politically so much, whereas of course a lot of private actors often are very good at making their voice heard. So is private industry lobby in China a powerful actor, or are state-owned enterprises, let's say, a bit disadvantaged in lobbying efforts?
That's because that's a very good question. I haven't thought about it so far, but because for nuclear industry, it's just because it's entirely state-owned. But it's like, say, for example, when you look at renewable industry, there are state-owned companies and there are also private-owned companies. I would say they both play a very important lobbying role. As both for wind and solar, you can say they are both very active and they do play important role. And also for the government, since they do, for wind and solar, they do also generate lots of employment. The government does listen to them, regardless whether they are private or state-owned.
Okay, so it's about employment, and then you get rate.
Yes.
The policies. Okay, thank you, Caspar. Please unmute.
Yes, thank you so much for your presentation. I have a question about the Chinese nuclear power plants. So far as I heard, they are much more on schedule and on budget than European nuclear projects. What do you think is the reason for this?
I think it's a very good question, but there are different reasons. But I think one reason is just like we don't have an NGO lobby against nuclear, so basically I think there's enough regulations to make sure the nuclears are safe, but we don't have the excessive regulations as demanded by the NGOs, I would say whose entire purpose is to strangle the nuclear industry. I think we don't have that in China. That helps. But also, I think in China, it's because it's very much, as a newly industrialized country, it very much has an engineer culture, because when you even look at the Chinese government top leadership, it's like many of them have a science and engineer background. And I think with people in the very high management with this kind of background, they are very practical. They make sure things get done instead of, I would say, it's like, I have been working with the international NGOs, with people basically who has very little background with how things are being done, but who basically have lots of opinions, try to make things difficult for people who are actually doing things. I think that's a huge difference between China and the West.
Does the Chinese regulator have a lot of knowledge? Like, I think there is some problem sometimes in Western nuclear power plants where where pretty much all the expertise is on the side of the power plants, and then they always have to provide all the checks, which then in turn doesn't allow the regulator to take any risks to say, okay, this is safe, but everything has to be demonstrated. Is there maybe something like this known?
That's a very good question, but I have to say that's one of the questions I would ask my Chinese contacts for my next visit, because I really don't know enough yet.
Okay. Yeah. Can I ask a second question?
Yes.
How is Chinese nuclear waste storage program progressing?
For that, actually, I don't know, because actually that's one of the questions very seldom discussed. So far, nobody say it's a huge big issue.
Okay.
Yeah, and also it's like I have talked to somebody, but they say it's just the potential of the fast breeder reactors just to burn up the waste. They don't think it's a big issue, and which I largely agree, I have to say.
Yeah, much more pragmatic, yes. Almost refreshing from a European perspective. Very reasonable. Okay, thanks a lot.
So Jan Rehbergen, you typed more questions in the chat. Feel free to ask them. Please unmute if you want to ask them.
Yeah. Yeah, let me see. You addressed most of the questions already, Niels. Let me see.
You were asking about marine propulsion. Are there any plans to use build nuclear ships?
Indeed. Yeah.
Oh, that I don't know.
Of course, in the Netherlands, there is a program called Structure Agenda for the maritime sector, and they have 5 big projects, and one of these projects is nuclear propulsion. And there's one commercial company that is now pursuing a reactor design for maritime applications, and they want to use it for to power deep sea mining operations, because if you're in the middle of the Pacific and you need a lot of power, there's just no way to get it. There's no other way to get it in those quantities that you need. So I think that's very exciting, and I was wondering if there are other like initiatives in other places, like for instance China.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Maybe somebody else.
Maybe I will. Yeah, maybe I will look around that to see if I can find some information on that.
So there had been a year or two ago an announcement by some Chinese shipping or nuclear corporation that they are working on a design of a nuclear ship, but it's easy to make PowerPoints. I don't know how serious they are about it, but knowing China, they probably have at least as serious a research and engineer, let's say, test program going as anyone else on the world. So I guess, yeah, they're at least working on it.
Well, I think we don't not just have some technical issues there. I mean, you need to develop it, of course, but there's also regulatory hurdles. You know, if you have a nuclear propelled ship, you need to be able to go to a harbor. Of course, there's ways around it. You could sort of dock them outside of the harbor, you know, and anyway, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here.
No, but it's true. I think from a technical point of view, we could just use military naval reactors and put them in ships, and obviously this worked. But the politics and the regulatory side is the challenge here. But the good thing is, for successful nuclear marine propulsion, you basically need the okay of China, of Singapore, of Egypt, and of the Netherlands. If those four countries can agree, then it has a future.
Yeah, you're right.
But my question is more on the security side, because we have nuclear submarines forever because they are secure, because they are military. But it's like if we have nuclear propulsion civilian ships, how do we prevent them from, for example, being hijacked by pirates who want to use the nuclear fuel to make dirty bombs or something?
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
something to be
that is easy. Like, bring guns. I don't know. It's the same as we do with nuclear power plants.
Yeah.
You can
the thing is
that barriers against all kinds of challenges.
The thing is, if you want to hijack a ship and get the nuclear fuel, it is a death sentence for yourself. So it's self-protective, I would say.
Yeah.
I mean, the radiation will get you.
Yeah, I mean, to extract plutonium from the nuclear fuel or something, you would need some very high-tech pirates to to capture that.
I think it's an academic problem, but yeah, the public will be worried about it, so it needs to be addressed. And I think the IMO will have some regulations that sort of facilitate this.
Yeah.
We'll have to wait and see.
Or maybe most state-level actors that are hijacking these kind of ships. That I don't know.
It's possible. So, but you know, it depends a little bit on which country is going to deploy these ships. The US, France, England, the Netherlands. You can be sure there will be repercussions if you try to hijack one of those ships. Anyway, I think there's some innovative ways around that.
Yeah, I think it's not that much more dangerous than an oil tanker that can run out of oil.
Yeah,
Did you know that about 50% of the core damage frequency of the Okinoto nuclear power plant is by oil spills, because it gets the water from the sea. So if there's an oil spill, you can't get the water anymore. And that's 50% of the probability of a core damage.
Okay, that's crazy. I didn't know that. Jan, you also wrote another interesting question in the chat, and this is, what about export of nuclear technology? Because on paper, China seems to have everything the Russians had as well, which is a state that supports nuclear power, a vertical integration. several designs that have been repeatedly built at home, which China is building very quickly. And yet, so far, the only export market has been Pakistan. So the question is basically, where is the flood of Chinese nuclear export reactors to compete with the Russian, very successful Russian Rosatom?
That's a good question. I think besides besides Pakistan, I think China has signed a MOU with Uganda to help them to build some nuclear reactors. But that's a very good question. It's like I think China is open to export its nuclear technology, but I think the question is really how to find the willing partners and to finalize a deal. So my question to you is like, do you, with nuclear renaissance in some EU countries, do you think some EU countries would be interested to work with China to build up nuclear in EU?
I think for a while there was an ongoing project in the UK.
Yeah.
So Chinese nuclear companies became shareholders in Hinkley Point C, as far as I know, and there were serious plans to build the Hualong 1 reactor in the UK. They also engaged with European regulators and made quite a bit of progress there. But then European public opinion on China changed. Europe became more skeptical of China and Chinese influence, and therefore those plans were put on hold. The UK actively, backrolled those plans, and therefore the chances right now are quite low, in my opinion, because the trend is to try and make Europe more sovereign, and the countries that we are, let's say, respect a lot as a possible competitor or maybe even threat are, let's say, in mainstream European policy circles, of course, Russia, but also China, and therefore little chance in, let's say, mainstream Europe. Maybe some periphery, Serbia, I don't know.
Yeah.
Turkey certainly an option, and they are already in talks. So
yeah. That's good one. So one thing I don't understand is Germany. It's like, yes, there's Germany. There's all the rhetoric about we need to have more energy security, energy independence. But then if you keep pushing for wind and solar, which actually you are getting more and more dependent on China while closing down your perfectly functioning nuclear, it almost looks like schizophrenia for me.
Yeah, I think regarding solar power, the idea is you import the modules and then they keep producing, and then you're not dependent on China anymore. And if China ever embargoes us, then we just don't expand solar any further, and then we have a few years to build up our own production again until the solar cells are degraded, so they have to be stripped out. And I think there is some merit in this, but a new concern has been the solar panels and their power electronics could be hijacked or could be, let's say, tampered with, and this has been has been some concern for German security and sovereignty concerned people. But yes, it's really crazy to switch off the nuclear reactors, because Germany had quite a lot in terms of sovereign nuclear supply chain, sovereign enrichment, sovereign fuel manufacturing, a lot of nuclear service companies, world-class experience in terms of nuclear oversight, nuclear regulation, and nuclear plant operations. They had some of the best capacity factors and lowest production costs, like once they were in production. So yeah.
Yes.
And maybe another question how much does the Chinese nuclear industry still rely on equipment and service and fuel and enrichment import from abroad? I mean, could you just decide to not buy any more Chinese nuclear foreign nuclear services and still keep everything running?
I think, yeah, that has been one of the focus of the Chinese nuclear industry. So the last time I checked this, in terms of kind of technology, what they call the self-reliance of technology is more than 90%. So they feel that they don't have this crucial dependence in terms of foreign technologies. And I think so in that aspect, I think they have really worked on that, and there's no major concern.
Okay, so
yeah.
And what about uranium?
Uranium is, I think they have, in terms mine uranium as they have or they have long-term contract with Tajikistan. I think it's called Tajikistan, and that's I think there's no big concern. And actually, there's some very interesting pilot technology in China. It's like this technology to get uranium from seawater. And they are really developing that, but I think that's really for the long term. But giving actually nuclear fuel is only a small part for the cost of nuclear. I think it's when we really look at the long term, if we really need to get uranium from seawater, we can do that, and that won't be prohibitively expensive. And actually, talking about the concern for uranium, it's very interesting because, as I told you before, like I have turned down offers from Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth to do anti-nuclear lobby in China. But actually, in some recent years, actually, during one of my talks in China, and then afterwards, there's a Chinese businessman who came to me and who asked me that whether I'm interested to take his money to do anti-nuclear lobby in other countries. And I said, why? No, it's like I'm pro-nuclear for any country, but he said that, think of this way, we only have uranium for 100 years. So if other countries don't do nuclear, it's better for us to get the new uranium fuel. But then I said, no, what you heard that we only have uranium for 100 years, that's definitely wrong. You don't have to be concerned about that.
But very shrewd guy.
Yes.
Maybe Dirk, are you listening? Because okay, maybe you all have a very good overview of Chinese Chinese uranium mining. If you want to chime in and say a few things about it, you can say no if you want. Okay, he doesn't have a microphone, but for anyone who's maybe listening on YouTube, Dirk Egelkraut has this amazing webpage, Nuklearia .de, Nuklearia with a C, and it's an extremely good, well-researched German .org. Also, I'm very sorry, .org, and it's an amazingly well-researched German language page on nuclear reactors. He has an extensive article on the Chinese Hualong-1 nuclear reactor, and also some overviews over uranium mines. And he told me just a few weeks ago that China has discovered, or China has discovered a few years ago, very large deposits in, I think it was sandstone of uranium, and they know this year they started mining them with in situ leaching, so there's no open pit, but they're dissolving the uranium from the ground. It's a very clean and minimal invasive process, and therefore they are they are getting increasingly sovereign with their uranium productions. Okay. Just a quick comment, because Dirk Egekout knows so much about this. Maybe some further questions. One thing that I've found very interesting about the comparison between the Chinese space sector and the Chinese nuclear sector is that the Chinese space sector has seen some privatization. Respectively, the government has allowed private actors to start designing their own rockets, for example. And this has created a lot of new startups and also a lot of innovation. For example, the companies closest to replicating the reusability and the propulsive landing technology from SpaceX are Chinese companies and Chinese private companies. And so my question is, why has China not allowed some private companies to join the nuclear sector as far as I know? And are there any plans to involve the private sector a bit more?
Well, that's a good question, but my answer is I don't know. That's some questions I would ask my contact in the industry to figure out more.
Yeah, but I'm also asking because China has been extremely conservative in its approach to introducing new reactor technologies, but even new reactor designs and iterations of a known technology. For example, when they design a new reactor, they don't finish the design and then they start the first reactor and everything goes well, they start building more reactors. No, they finish the first reactor and then they run them a year or 2 or 3, and only then do they start approving new reactors, and then 1 to 3 years later there's a construction start. So there's let's say a 10-year innovation cycle in comparison to, I don't know, the 2 or 3 year innovation cycle that you could in theory also play.
Yeah. Yeah, they are. You are right. The observation is very right. They are rather conservative. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, so I mean, it has its pros and cons. So on the one hand, you have a lot of stability. On the other hand, it means that some very promising designs, like the say AP 1400, are only introduced very gradually instead of going all out.
Yes. Yeah.
And maybe another question to the about the organizational side of the policy making and the decision making. Like, who runs in China energy policy? What ministry? What ministers? What organizations?
So actually, they do have an energy ministry. They also called Nuklearia. They essentially, that's a central place, but it's a newly formed ministry, which was newly formed a couple of years ago. And then besides the energy ministry, what we have is like another ministry play a very crucial role. It's called Central Commission on Development and Reform Commission. Development and Reform Commission. Basically, that's one of the crucial ministry which basically does planning. For example, the famous 5-year plan. They play a very crucial role in terms of this long-term planning for energy and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. And another question. Okay, it's probably a bit specific, but about the Chinese nuclear plant sites. I know that most of the Chinese population is living at or near the coast, so there is probably a lot of competition there. But who decides where you can build nuclear power plants?
I think it's both depends on different things. It depends on demands as well. Basically, where has the industries most located. But the interesting thing is that actually, when I talk to people, it's like actually for places which actually already, for example, have 1 or 2 reactors, both the local government and the local people are very happy with reactors, and they essentially they want to build more. But for places like there's no reactors, for example, the 3 stored inland side, there's fear basically, also basically being flared up by all this anti-nuclear propaganda by some of the anti-nuclear government researchers.
And maybe what a follow-up question is, what is the rationale or the motivation of the anti-nuclear researchers or parts of in the Chinese government? Because there are many ways or reasons you can be anti-nuclear. So yeah, what's the Chinese flavor?
I actually have to really look into it. It's like I would say it's about fear, but their argument, I think most of the argument has just been copied by different sources of Western anti-nuclear arguments. They just copy it.
Okay, so they're very strongly, that's maybe even leads directly to the next question. How strongly is the Chinese discourse on energy influenced by the West? I mean, is it, and has there been a change over time? I mean, is it getting more, Chinese discourse instead of constantly looking to the West? Just.
I have to say, yeah, there's always this energy realism born out of our own experience, but especially with the climate movement, there's really lots of Western influence. Like, for example, this German think tank, Angora Energy Vendor, they have a big operation in China. They constantly tell the Chinese wind and solar and batteries are the solutions, just as they are saying in China, in Germany. And so they do have lots of influence, and unfortunately, I have to say.
Okay, so those organizations are basically welcome and allowed to operate in China.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and also it's like it's not only that, but also it's like including some researchers in the top universities like Tsinghua and Beida, and they sometimes they got Western funding, or they have some joint research center on energy, and they do just so they very much basically have lots of, as you know, that basically in the climate circle, wind and solar and now batteries are the solution. That's a common narrative that very much pushed in China as well.
Okay, yeah. Very good. Well, not so good this, but it's very good that at least so far it hasn't caught so much traction in China to really cause a major stop or slowdown of the nuclear expansion policy. I mean, after the Fukushima pause or break, it's really picking up steam again. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
I'm not sure if I understand about Fukushima. I mean, don't the Chinese nuclear power plants also have hydrogen recombiners and bunkered electrical generators? So are they even susceptible to the same errors as Fukushima? I mean, what would be the reason to slow down in China? I think in Europe it was public pressure, because the public doesn't understand anything about nuclear power plants. But in China, does the public also play a role in the public opinion?
I think it does not play. It play a much less role. It's just somehow it's for the issue of nuclear. It's just besides Fukushima, it was very interesting when you look at basically how the Chinese media report Fukushima. It's just the internal government government assessment is like saying the Fukushima, especially last year or 2 years ago, when the Japanese government decided to release the wastewaters from some leaked government export testimony. Basically, their internal assessment was that it's okay, it's not a big deal. But for political reasons, it's like the media really played up the fear and saying it's a huge deal and it's horrible what Japan is doing this. And then it's like there's a huge anti-Japanese sentiment within the Chinese government, within the Chinese population. It got so bad. Actually, there's 2 criminal cases. So in one case, some random, very nationalist guy tried to attack some Japanese kids in Suzhou, and then actually a Chinese teacher tried to protect the kids, and she died. That's one of the very bad cases. And then there's another case in Shenzhen, and actually, so again, some nationalistic nuts decided to attack some Japanese people who's working there, and that also resulted in deaths. These 2 cases got so bad. And finally, the Chinese government really decided we need to really tune down this nationalistic fever, and then kind of all this media frenzy about how bad, how dangerous this Fukushima wastewater is. Kind of the Chinese government really cracked it down. Now they present the proper information that okay, the Japanese have dealt with wastewater and they are safe to be released, but unfortunately, that's politics behind it.
Okay, so it seems to be more of a clash between the neighboring countries than about nuclear. The rivalry between China and Japan to try to, well, not criticize, to try to criticize Japan as much as possible.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's the issue with nuclear. It seems to often be like a political playing ball.
Yeah.
So you also talked about being an interlocutor between the German Energiewende politicians, for example, Mr. Fell, and Chinese politicians. To what extent was the Chinese renewable energy subsidy program and also the industry expansion inspired by Germany? I mean, did they look at Germany and think, okay, let's start this as well? Or was there some development and some industrial policy even before Germany did this?
I think it's both. It's both. They did look at Germany, and there's lots of interactions and exchanges between the Chinese energy expert and the German energy experts. And I think especially in terms of the feed-in tariff, and China did look at how Germany designed the EEG and copied a large part of it.
Okay, so one could actually say the German renewable energy subsidy scheme or expansion scheme was a kind of blueprint for the Chinese.
Yeah, in certain extent, yes. Yes.
So the interesting thing is that, of course, the German scheme had a much larger impact outside of Germany because China copied it than inside of Germany, because China is not quite 20 times the size of Germany. So
yeah. Yeah, but I think another interesting part is like actually China really is looking, I think in terms of its, China does really look at as not only as so-called environmental policy as Germans perceive, but it's also as industrial policy. But they do feel like I feel like I very much welcome the Chinese recent changes to get rid of feed-in tariff, to really to make, if the renewable supporters claim renewables are the cheapest, then they shouldn't be subsidized. And that's why one thing I feel is very problematic with the German discussion, because the Greens always say renewables, the wind and solar are the cheapest, but they continue to insist it has to be continue to be subsidized. I feel like right now it's really time for Germany to learn from China. You need to adapt your policy.
Maybe it's if, for the audience, we're approaching 1.5 hours. So if you have some final questions, please write them in the chat or raise your hands. Maybe a few final questions from me. You said that coal costs around 5 cents per kilowatt hour if you're doing behind the meter generation.
Yes.
What are the costs for nuclear? I mean, have there been any publications?
There should be. I think the last time it's about at that price. It's similar or even cheaper. But so nuclear is price-wise is very affordable in China.
Okay, so it's actually able to compete with coal power on its own merits.
Yes.
Even without some externality, CO2 pricing or something like that. Okay, that's.
Yes. Yeah.
That's very good to hear. And another question, maybe for the audience, if one wants to learn more about Chinese energy policy and especially nuclear power, are there some very good English-speaking or English language sources you can propose, or some even Chinese web pages that give a very good overview, that have very good statistics, or are there some good say history or summary books that you can recommend on Chinese energy and Chinese nuclear?
On nuclear, I don't know. That's something I have to ask. It's like I have to say for a long time, it's like my work has really been focused on the issue of technology openness. But so only recently I feel like I really need to focus more on nuclear advocacy. So I'm still learning, and I will share more with you once I figure out more.
Okay. Well, thank you very, very much from my side. Are there any questions from the audience? Anything? Okay, looks like people have gotten all their questions answered. In this case, I say we close this for today. Thank you very much, Dale, for giving this presentation and answering all our many questions. And, yeah.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, welcome. And I hope we can work together, hopefully to change direction for Germany. I think it's really hard. it's heartbreaking for me to say, essentially to witness Germany to committing industrial suicide with its energy policy.
Yeah, we very much agree. Okay, thank you. So I will stop the recording and end the stream. And yeah, also thanks for anyone who is watching on YouTube for joining.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, end the stream. I mean, you can leave now if you want. Streaming.
Okay.
And